Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and you are watching another episode of the Crystal Petry Podcast, Season 4. From exploring the woods of Prince George's County as a kid to protecting ecosystems nationwide, today's guest turned a childhood love of animals into a powerful life mission. He's a biologist, nature photographer, and founder of Nature Under Your Nose. And he's redefining what it looks like to belong in the outdoors. Get ready for a conversation about wildlife, representation, and purpose driven work. David Greaves, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you are here because, and I think maybe I told you this when we initially spoke, you are the first nature photographer, nature person, photographer, biologist that I've had on this podcast in 4 seasons.
Okay.
So you are
Awesome.
the very first. No pressure, David. No pressure here.
Okay.
No, no pressure.
That's all right. I'm not mad at that.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm so excited to have you on here. I cannot wait to hear of your stories and learn from you. But first, David, tell us, where in the world are you?
I'm right here in Newark, Delaware on the East Coast. That's where I
Oh,
live. Been here since 2011.
okay, excellent, excellent. Now let's hop into this podcast. I'm so excited about this.
Mhm.
Okay, take us back to your childhood. What are some earliest memories of you being outside in Prince George's County? And that's in Maryland. For people that may
Yes.
not know, that's in Maryland. It's also known as PGC, Pretty Girl County as well. It's a lot of acronyms. Yes, yes. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I grew up in PG County, Maryland, and I am a child of the 80s. So we didn't have internet, there was no social media, there was no tablets, none of that stuff that we have today. So, what we did was we went outside. So I can remember I'm growing up in my neighborhood in Clinton, Maryland, and we had black kids, white kids, Asian kids, Hispanic. We were all outside together, exploring the woods in this rural area that we lived in, and um, all day long. Until the street lights came on. That's when you got to go in the house. But we
Exactly.
were out there all day long, and just exploring everything. We looked for ponds and creeks, rolling over logs, and looking for insects and frogs and salamanders and things like that. And that's what we did all day long. Growing up in Maryland, it's something that I look back on fondly, and I strive to pass it on to others as well. It's nothing like being outside in nature and enjoying yourself and taking in the vitamin D and all that good stuff, and seeing what's hanging out in the woods with you.
At what age or maybe what moment in your life did your love for animals and birds especially spark? When did it go from, I'm just out here with what the neighborhood kids, we
hmm
rolling over logs to something deeper?
I honestly think it's something that I was just born with. As far
Mhm.
back as I can remember, being in kindergarten, we had library days or library time. And while other kids were reading comic books and, I don't know, whatever, cartoon books or whatever, I gravitated towards nature, animal encyclopedias or
Mhm.
field guides or just anything encyclopedias, anything that had to deal with learning or educating myself about animals and nature. And it could be things that are found locally, or it could be things that were found as far as Africa. I just wanted to learn about those animals and the habitats that they lived in, and it's just something that I naturally gravitated towards as far as back as I can remember. That's what I was interested in.
And when did it become more than just a hobby for you?
Um, I probably would say it's one of those things where you do something as a kid and you love it, then you go through your teenage years and you get interested in other things,
Mhm.
and but when I really got into um, high school and I knew I was going to have a biology class, I got really excited about that because finally in school now I'm going to be learning about something that I'm interested in versus
Yes.
some of the other subjects. And then because I loved animals so much, my thought process was I was going to, go to college and become a veterinarian. And so I just, everything from in my life at that time was just directed towards, doing something with animals, caring for them, learning about them. So that kind of like I'll probably say around 16 or so was when I wanted to do something in a profession that had to do with animals and nature. And the veterinary science at that time was the only path that I knew about. So that's what I was kind of targeting when I went to college and, for an adult career.
Okay. What did spending so much time outdoors teach you about yourself?
That's a good question. Um, it taught me that I have a desire for discovery. I, and a desire for discovery, in that I have a very persevering attitude. I would stay outside for hours looking for something, and I didn't go back in the house until I found something to show for what I had spent that time outside doing. So that could be, um, you know, digging in the dirt and pulling some worms up and going to show my mom, or finding bird eggs, or a turtle, or whatever the case may be. It was that I want to know what's going on out here, and I want to know why it's doing what it's doing out here, and I'm not stopping until I figure that out. And that mentality has served me well as an adult in terms of just wanting to learn and discover things, but also a level of perseverance to keep searching and keep going until I find what I'm looking for. And I learned that from spending a lot of time in the outdoors.
Okay. I have David Greaves here on the Crystal Petry Podcast. Now, David, normally I don't, unless the conversation warrants it, I don't talk about race, but
Hmm.
you are a Black man in
Hmm.
nature spaces, which is something that I want to say it's rarely seen, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just rarely seen in my bubble. So this is a
Yeah.
two-part question for you.
Hmm.
Nature spaces, are Black men being more involved in those spaces? And as a Black man in nature spaces, what has been some of your experiences?
Okay. So I think the first question you were kind of asking about, do I are Black men in these spaces, is that kind of a common thing?
Correct.
Um, I would say initially I didn't think so. When as an adult, when I would start to go outside into these different spaces and recreate, I wouldn't see a lot of just either people of color or Black people in general out there, um, enjoying outdoors, hiking, camping, and things like that. Um, it wasn't until probably 2020 or so, like right around the time of the pandemic, is where I actually got on social media and started, seeing these different accounts of Black men in the outdoors, Black men hiking, Black men camping, and and it blew my mind, because when I started getting into these spaces and enjoying myself, I thought I was the only one. And
Mhm.
through social media and through, the power of the internet, I realized that I wasn't the only one. But I think when you think about when you go to a hiking store or a camping store or or outdoorsman store or whatever, the marketing doesn't say or show that there's
Correct.
people of color or much less Black men out here enjoying these things as well. Now, I think that that has gotten better over maybe the last 5 to 10 years, but in general, even as a kid, when I thought about hiking or camping, I didn't think about myself or other people of color being in these spaces. Even though I spent a lot of time in there, it was just when you look at TV and movies, we weren't seen in those
Right.
spaces, and if we were trying to get out of there because somebody was trying to get us. So,
Exactly. Somebody was
um,
chasing us.
right, right, right. And there's the whole historical context of Black people. in the woods and escaping the woods to get to freedom, but not
Mhm.
necessarily staying there to hang out and have fun. It was like I'm passing through here to get somewhere else to
Yes.
freedom and that kind of thing. So to answer that first question, initially I didn't think that there were a lot of black men in these spaces in the outdoors, but now I see that we are here and we are representing ourselves in a very awesome way. Um, Now, to your second question about what have my experiences been in the outdoors as a black man, I think that's a layered question. But I will start by saying, um, one, it's been amazing
Mhm.
because when I think about um, around the pandemic time in 2019, I just had it in my mind to go and buy a kayak. I had spent a lot of time in the woods and, taking my cameras and stuff out there and photographing stuff out in the woods. And I sat on the dock of a bay and I looked out there and I said, I wonder what's out there. How do I get out there to see what's going on out there? And it came to my mind to go get a kayak. And I bought one in the fall of 2019 and I didn't know the pandemic was coming, but when everything shut down, the only place you really could really go was
The
outside somewhere. And
outdoors
because I
was
was
open.
right, right. And because I was already doing that, I was like, oh, great. I had more time to do it now since, there's nothing else really to do. So, during that pandemic, a lot of people were dealing with mental health issues and just not being clamped down like that and,
Mhm.
all this doom and gloom. I was able to go out, if I took a day off of work on the weekend and go sit in a kayak on the Chesapeake Bay or, some other body of water for 3 or 4 hours. And I forgot we were in a pandemic. The I forgot I had to wear a mask to go into the store or, about vaccines and all this stuff. I was out in the water. I'm seeing bald eagles fly over me. I'm seeing herons slowly fly by. Um, or beavers or whatever the case may be, or turtles popping up next to me. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is the mental health reset that I needed for these times that we're in. Now, alongside with those experiences, I have some other experiences where I had to deal with microaggressions from people who typically don't see people like me out there who kind of have um, what they feel is an ownership of these spaces, or they want to gatekeep these spaces, and they want to know what I'm doing out here. Do I know what I'm doing out here?
Right.
As in terms of like educating me about these spaces. Now, not knowing my background as a biologist, I know about the spaces that I'm in because I studied it. I may know more than you, but I don't wear that on my sleeve because I'm not out here to do that, right?
Right.
So sometimes dealing with those microaggressions, sometimes I can sense that the person didn't have any malintent with it, and other times I could tell that they were trying to make themselves feel bigger by trying to make me feel smaller because they don't think that I know what I'm doing in these spaces, or I'm not experienced to be enough to be out here and know what I'm looking at and what I'm
Mhm.
seeing. Those type of interactions were challenging and irritating at a lot of the times that I had experienced them. But I think for me, the good outweighed the bad in those situations. I'm not going to stop going out here because I've had these experiences with these folks, who want to probably discourage me from coming back, or other people from coming out here and taking them space in places that they think they only belong. So it's kind of a bittersweet kind of thing when it comes to my experiences, but I take the sweet over the bitter any day.
Yes. And as I'm listening to you speak, David, I'm thinking the sweet far outweighs the bitter in this
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
When did photography come into the picture for you?
hmm Wow. So that's funny because so around um 2010 or so, I was trying to get into some side hustles and make some extra money outside of work,
Hmm.
and I had bought a laptop to make music, and which is something else I do. I love music. I'm some timey musician here and there, but I had
Hmm.
bought a laptop to make music, and it had a video editing a program on there. And at the time, I had a family member that was in the military, and he was coming home, and I wanted to make some kind of a media presentation for him. And I kind of got the bug for video editing. And then, with video editing, you need video. So I had to learn how to shoot because I needed to have content to put into the editing suite to make
Correct.
something, right? So I, I self-taught myself via magazines at the time and certain websites how to shoot and how to do videography. And a lot of the skills from the videography and concepts transferred over to still photography as well. So from probably 2010 to maybe 2015, I spent 5 years just doing wedding events and party events, filming and photographing and making video packages of, um, these different events for family and friends and folks at church or whatever the case may be. So, but around 2015, I kind of got overwhelmed with that whole process. It's a lot of work to edit events and attend the events, and then you're dealing with people who don't want to pay you what you're worth and want to always want discounts for whatever reason. So I kind of got sick of doing that kind of work,
Mm-hmm.
and also at that time, um, I was midway through my career and kind of trying to figure out what was next for me. So I was a little bit overwhelmed and had a lot of, you know, um, anxiety to an extent. And the place that I go to release anxiety was nature, right? So I was at a wildlife refuge in Philadelphia by the airport, John Hines Wildlife Refuge. And I took my equipment with me that day for whatever reason, and I just started to film whatever I saw. Bumblebees, butterflies, birds over the wetlands and things. And I was like, huh, this is a sense of peace just came over me. And I was like, this is what I need to be doing with this equipment, not the wedding stuff dealing with people. I need to be filming and dealing with animals because, they're less demanding. I don't have to pay them anything, or they don't have to pay me,
Exactly.
whatever, pay me anything, or whatever the case may be. I don't have to do any attitudes. They're just doing what
Yes.
they're doing and being who they are. And I could just kind of sit in their world and observe them and film them and enjoy myself. And it took me back to when I was a kid, where I used to watch all the nature shows and the films and wished I could be where they were and narrate and film what they were seeing. I was like, huh, I got this equipment. I have the skill set. I'll just apply it to this other thing that I love, which is nature,
Hmm.
and go from there. So once I started doing that, and I was mostly doing video at the time, um, a buddy of mine at work said, "Hey man, why don't you try still photography? See how you like that? It's a little bit different from video, but see if you want to, get stills, do stills." And I said, "Huh, I'll try it." So one day I just took a camera out, left all the video stuff at home,
Hmm.
just took the stills camera and forced myself just to use that, and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, man, I love video, but the still thing is something else different about it that I enjoy, just capturing moments in time. And that's when I fell in love with it. So around 2016 or so was when I took the skill set of videography and photography from events and weddings and things and applied it to nature. And that also inspired me to continue to keep going outside.
Hmm.
And where else can I go to get more content or get more photos and build up my portfolio and just see what's out there locally? If I traveled for work, if I was traveling for vacation, I took my cameras with me to see what nature was in whatever location I was going to. So that exposed me to different species and things like that that I would not find where I lived at. But I always wanted to see what is around in these different states or countries that I may be traveling to, and that just opened up a whole nother level of just fun and exploration for me.
Hmm. Birds seem to have a particular place in your heart and in your nature photography.
Mhm.
What fascinates you and what stands out about the birds for you?
So people ask me this question a lot, and it's funny because one of the things is that birds are everywhere. Like you can go to
Yes.
whatever country, continent, state, city. There's always some level of birds there, from the most exotic to the common,
Hmm.
and they're there. And the other thing for me about birds is, um, as I mentioned before, I'm a sometime musician, but I grew up just with an ear for music, and I started playing piano like around 5 years old. And I just pick up on music and melodies very easily. So when I go outside, the first thing I do is I listen to see what the birds are talking about, who's singing what, and what does that sound like. So the music piece of it, the bird songs and the bird calls, attracts me to them as well because some birds can have very not so pleasant sounds to the ears, but some of them have some melodies that it's just music. And I love that aspect of um, interacting with birds and photographing them. But the other aspect of birds is that when we think about just birds you see every day, with a camera and a lens, I can make a what seems to be just a common bird that you just kind of just pass off. That's just a gray bird. I can
Yes.
zoom in on that bird and pull out colors that the naked eye just can't see, or just you just don't take the time to look at, and it brings a new value to that particular bird that we may seem as common. And I've done it with mourning doves and sparrows and that birds you see everywhere, just kind of putting around, but they themselves have their own intrinsic beauty that I think gets ignored. And I think that kind of that thought process translates to how we deal with people sometimes too, and that we may treat people a certain kind of way because that's just there's nothing special about this person or that
Mhm.
person until you really take a look to get to know them and see them in a different way. Then that intrinsic value shows itself sometimes, and I think I learned that from birds and how we look at them. It was one time when I was really digging into becoming a nature photographer and videographer. I
Mhm.
would look at, the so-called experts and, what they're talking about and reading in their articles. And it was one professional nature photographer that said something to the effect of, he doesn't waste time taking photos of sparrows that you can see anywhere. He's got to go to Madagascar. He's got to go to all these exotic places to see the birds that matter or that more important.
Mhm.
And I myself taking offense to that because one, everybody's not going to be able to go to these different places that you're able to go
Right.
to. So does that mean that they should value or ascribe a lesser value to the birds that they can see or the animals that they can see locally? To me, that was offensive to me that he said that, and I made it a point to whether it's a local bird or a common bird, I'm going to give it the same amount of attention and value as it's a bird that I can find in Costa Rica somewhere. To
Mhm.
me, they all bring value and they all bring something to nature, or they wouldn't be here or they wouldn't exist. And that's how I kind of look at it as well. So that kind of, birds just bring um, to me just so much value, just the life between the songs, their beauty, and just it's just interesting when you learn how they interact with each other and nature and some of the attributes that they have. They're really fascinating to learn about.
Mhm. And I think, David, that most times, or a lot of times, whatever word you want to use, people take birds for granted because we see them
Mhm.
all the time. We
Yes.
see them flying, we see them in the trees, we see them on the power lines. So we don't take a second look. We just
Mhm.
go about our day. But your nature photography and the nature photographer causes us to stop the
Mhm.
scroll, stop and really look at the birds and pay attention.
Yeah.
And, just for that moment, just be in amazement of these
Yeah.
beautiful creatures that, we all probably take for granted at some point in time in
Yeah.
our life.
Mhm.
Now, David, you went to an HBCU, historically
Yep.
Black college and university. Which HBCU did you go to, and what was it like studying biology there?
Yeah. So I went to Lincoln University, uh, the first degree granting HBCU in the country. I'm gonna gotta put that
All
out there.
right, talk your stuff.
Uh,
Talk your stuff.
uh, True blue and orange. So, yeah. So studying biology at Lincoln was amazing. And as I mentioned before, I was heading into looking to be a veterinarian, which I ultimately didn't do. I chose to go into the environmental field, but um, being there with professors who looked like me, who had shared experiences that I had, and were teaching me science just added another layer to what I enjoyed about going to a HBCU in general. The environment was supportive. I remember when I was shifting my focus of study from veterinary science to the environment, I was freaked out about it because if anybody had spoken to me, who knew me before, all I ever talked about was being a veterinarian. So for me to, at that stage in my life, switching something that I always talked about, it was scary. But I sat down and spoke to this one of my teachers, my professor, and he said, "Look, if this is not what you want to do, there's a host of other things you can do with a biology degree that may still be in your interest of nature and the environment, but it just doesn't have to be veterinary science." And he said, "That's totally fine." Excuse me, but it was that comfortability and my ability to go and speak to a professor about something that was so anxiety causing, but changed the course of my life in a positive way because I believe that the shift that I made from veterinary science to the environmental science field, like it's that changed the scope of my life. And I probably wouldn't be here talking to you right now about what I'm doing if I had stayed in the track that I was originally planning to go on, but I may not have been happy in doing that.
Mhm.
So, but other than that, I mean, just the culture, HBCUs, it's the culture, it's the what you learn about yourself, taking classes that are focused on teaching you your history, your before slavery history.
Mhm.
Um, that was amazing to me because everything I had learned about our history in school started with slavery, and then you got a few one-offs here and there. But when I'm taking classes with Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who wrote the book that came before Columbus, that blew my mind because I didn't know we had people of African descent coming to Central America and coming to America and then trading with Native Americans before Europeans got here. I didn't know that. So
Mhm.
having that history that I learned at HBCU, that just blew my mind. And I just wanted to be in an environment where I knew that the people there wanted to be there and they wanted to ensure that I was successful versus maybe going to another school where that's not an HBCU, I may have had to deal with other layers or microaggressions or just being another number to a professor and then not caring about whether I succeed or not. So that's why, like, and then HBCUs are known you know, for successful doctors and PhDs and
Correct.
lawyers getting their
Correct.
start there and then shooting off into the stratosphere after they leave an HBCU. It's like the launch pad for success in a lot of black people's lives. So, I wouldn't change anything about it. I love my experience there and I still go back as much as possible to help out as much as I can with the younger students and people coming up.
Why did you switch from veterinary science to biology?
So it was a I I don't think I knew. So I had the passion for the animals and caring for them, but I didn't know at the time what it all entailed to become a veterinarian. The amount of schooling, how competitive it was to get into veterinary school, and I think part of it was definitely a fear at the time, and I I I just felt like it's I after understanding what it all entailed to become a veterinarian, I was like, I don't want to do this. It just, and I don't want to say it was too hard. Too hard. I mean, I feel like if I had persevered through, I would have done it because that's just my personality. I
Mhm.
will push through everything, but um, it was something there that I just felt like I'm not going to be happy if I go this route. I want to experience life because I would have had to be in the school for I did the 4 years of undergrad and then I think another 8 years to complete being the whole process to become a veterinarian. And then you got to determine if you're going to open your own practice or work at a hospital. So for me, Like, that's a lot of time for me not to be living life. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to experience getting out of school, being an adult, doing the adult things and living life. But um, I chose another path, which is the environmental science path, because it still allowed me to do something that was going to have a positive impact on nature and animals, even though I was not directly going to be working on an animal or doing surgery or something like that. I can work in an environment where I can implement policies that will help me to clean up a lake or a water body or a forest or a watershed or a wetland. And I know that because of what I'm doing, that environment and those animals will be their lives will be improved because of what I'm doing. So it was just one of those things where like I kind of I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then honestly, I started taking more environmental science classes under my major, and I'm like, I kind of like this more. This stuff interests me a lot more than the veterinary science thing. So it was a combination of just being young and the world was closing in because I was getting ready to graduate. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I just chose a different path. But I have a friend of mine who we were the only two veterinary science majors at Lincoln at the time, and he went on to went to Tuskegee. He's doing his thing. And he's actually opened a practice in Delaware, and I went to see him the other day, and like I'm proud of him. I love that he went and finished it, but I think that was his path, and I chose mine, and I think we both did the right thing for ourselves.
I have David Greaves here on the Crystal Petry podcast. So, David, you are a biologist
Mhm,
for the EPA,
mhm.
Environmental Protection Agency. What
Yes.
does cleaning up the environment actually look like? I mean, we hear about the EPA, and I think most people have an idea of
Mhm.
kind of what they do, but what does cleaning the environment really look like?
So that's the layered question. I'll try to simplify it as much as possible without taking too much of the necessary details out of it. So um, I work at EPA in Region 3. We have 10 regional offices across the country. And the region that I work in, we deal with Pennsylvania, DC, Delaware, Maryland, and I might be missing one, but you can look that up. Don't quote me on that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, um, so basically, how it's structured is we have different divisions that deal with different media. So we have a water protection division, air protection division, land and chemicals division, a hazardous site cleanup division, and then we have um, divisions that have lawyers or office of regional counsel, where we have lawyers that deal with environmental cases and things like that. And then we also have a criminal investigations bureau that deals with like they're basically like environmental policemen who go out and arrest people for dumping illegally and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, or you know purposefully doing things to harm the environment. But in these different divisions, you have different regulations that are used to give us the authority to implement certain actions out in the environment. So where I used to work, I worked in the water protection division, and I worked in a program that dealt with pollution from runoff. So if you have a rain event and you have a lot of grass clippings or whatever all types of particles that maybe find themselves on the road or on your roof and things like that. Rain washes that off and it ends up going down into the sewers, and then it ends up getting discharged to a body of water. And if you have enough of this kind of just random particles of pollutants getting discharged into a body of water, it pollutes the water and it can cause fish to die, or fish kills as we call them, and just really foul up people's drinking water that they recreate in, right? So through these different programs, we fund grants through the state that allows the state to go directly to the source of the issue and implement projects that will clean up or deal with said issue. Or we have people who um, deal with air emissions. So if there is an industrial plant that's they're not complying with our regulations for how much emissions are allowed that's safe
Mm-hmm.
for humans to breathe, then we have to we'll ask them to fix the situation, and if they don't do it, then we have enforcement measures that we can take to make them comply, and that could be through fines or that could be through criminal investigations and things like that. So It really just depends on what media you're working in and, what the environmental problem is. And then we kind of look at, using our regulations to address those issues. And where I work now, which we call the Hazardous Site Cleanup Division, I clean up, I manage the cleanup of hazardous waste sites. So if, let's say in your yard, somebody had buried some drums in your yard and you didn't know about it, but for some reason your water kept coming up either smelling funky or looking weird or whatever the case may be, and you called um, your local government and they involved the state and the state involved us, I would come in and hire a contractor to assess your water, look at your soil, and see if we can determine where the source of the problem is. And that may require us to come and dig up your backyard to remove the source, and
Mm-hmm.
then we'll look at what measures we can take to ensure that we want to return your yard to the way it was before, or if not better, but also to make sure that all the remnants of that pollution and contamination are gone, so that you're not impacted by it anymore. And that also, we figure out who did it. So who put the drums there? If you can find them, then we'll sue them and have them pay for the cost of addressing your issue in your yard with those contaminated drums. So that's just kind of like a little insight of how we do things. But
Mm-hmm.
it's media based. It's you know based upon the regulations that give us the authority to act in the communities and act for the public. And the other piece of it that I've enjoyed through my 20 plus year career at EPA is the outreach and education that we do in the community to let them know how to empower themselves to address environmental issues that are in their communities as well. And I spent a lot of time in my early to mid of my career being in schools. I'm located in Philadelphia for my job, and a group of us would go to schools and talk about what EPA does because a lot of kids hadn't heard about EPA and what we
Right.
do and what the environment looks like. A lot of times kids think the environment is somebody, going out and hugging trees and but the environment is where you live at. So there's things
Mm-hmm.
that you can do to impact the environment in your community. There's if you have dogs and dogs are defecating everywhere and nobody's picking it up. If that rain comes and washes that down the sewer drain, that ends up getting into the water somewhere else that the people have to recreate it. So we teach them about not pouring chemicals down the drain because that can cause sewer explosions and things like this. So there's a host of things that we would go and teach these kids about the EPA and why the environment is important. And that was my passion in working at EPA is, being out in the community and educating them and empowering them to know how they can positively impact the environment and make changes for themselves, but also hip them to this is what EPA does, and this is what you need to know about, so you can hold us accountable to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to, bridge those gaps, and it was important for me to spread the good message that EPA is here and what we're doing out here, and the good that we do, and if we're not doing as good as we can do, how can we improve? And we want to hear from you how we can improve as well. So you got the on the ground stuff, and then you also have the community based stuff that we do as well to get folks involved and have an understanding about what the environment is and what needs to be done to keep it clean and healthy for everybody involved.
What inspired you to start Nature Under Your Nose?
Okay, so when I started back in 2016 or so with doing the videography and photography of nature and animals, one of the things I realized was there's animals all around us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like you had alluded to before, we don't take the time to stop and look at them or look for them or pay them any mind. So as I began to travel up and down the East Coast and going to different wildlife refuges and parks, and I'm not going far. I could be going to a local park or just down, a couple hours down to the Maryland or Baltimore area or DC or whatever. Excuse me. I'm seeing all these cool things that people tend to walk past and ignore. I can
Mm-hmm.
walk down the street and see a woodpecker tapping on the fence. And I'm like, wow, woodpecker, it's this, that, woodpecker, whatever. And people just walking on by, don't care. And so I remember I was driving from Delaware to Baltimore to visit family in the DC area, and I saw a hawk sitting on a street lamp. I was like, man,
Wow.
look at this beautiful hawk. And now that I told you that, when you start driving, start looking at the street lamps and the
I
power
see
lines,
them
and you
all the
start,
time.
yes,
I see them
yes,
all the time. They're there
yes,
hunting.
yep, absolutely. So when I saw that, I was like, man, these things are everywhere. This is just nature right under our noses. And I was like, oh shoot, nature under your nose. I like that. So I went home and got on the computer. I Googled it to make sure nobody else had it. And then there was no websites with it, and I locked it in and did my LLC for it. And but the concept of it is that you could find nature anywhere, anytime, and it's for everyone. And I wanted to bring a sense of, you don't. A lot of times people think about, excuse me, think about recreating and nature as not being for them, especially in the black community. That's for somebody else. That's not for us.
Hmm.
Or I have to go all the way to Acadia National Park to experience something cool. I can't find anything around here that's nature based that's as cool as I've seen on TV or somewhere else. So my goal with Nature Under Your Nose was to say, hey, look, you don't have to go to Acadia National Park. You don't have to go to Africa to see.
Madagascar.
Right. No, I'm not discouraging anyone not to go there, but what I'm
Mhm.
saying is that there's value where you are as well. So when I started Nature Under Your Nose, and I got on social media, I made a point to kind of say, hey, look, I was just down here in this part of Maryland, or this part of Delaware, and I saw this eagle, or I saw this. You can go out here and see these things as well.
Mhm.
And the other piece of it was that, my goal was to increase representation or let people see themselves represented in the outdoors. So my goal was to say, hey, look, I'm a black man. I went to this refuge. I went to this park. I saw this. I made it back home safely. You too can do the same thing. And certainly, you want to be safe wherever you go, and you want to, make sure that you're, taking whatever precautions you need to take to make sure that you are recreating safely in the outdoors. But I want to let people know that if I can do it, you can do it too. And I wasn't anywhere exotic. I saw this butterfly at this local park.
Mhm.
They're there. You can go see them too. So the goal was to kind of increase awareness to the nature that's around you, that you don't have to travel, super far to see beautiful things. The other aspect of it was that I want people to see themselves represented in nature around them. And then thirdly, the other thought process was no matter where you go, take a look to see what natural spaces or species of animals that are endemic to wherever you are, just to give you and this is another added piece of value. You could be going to, you know, um, Mexico to hang out and, at the hotel, but what species or what flowers or what birds can you see while you're in Mexico while you're there? It just adds another layer of enjoyment to traveling or wherever you may find yourself. And that's what I wanted to encourage people to do with Nature Under Your Nose.
Why is representation in nature and in wildlife spaces so important to you?
Um, it's important to me because one, I feel like there has been a concerted effort to keep people that look like me out of these spaces. So I,
Hmm.
I don't like people telling me not where to go.
Right.
so, so and why are you telling me not to come here? Just something that you don't want me to see or enjoy as well. So it's that piece of it. But I think that so there's some layers to it, right? So I think it's important because, like I said, there's been a concerted effort to kind of gatekeep these spaces
Hmm.
for whatever reason, and I feel like there's value for other people, and especially in the black community, to get into these spaces and enjoy them for mental health reasons. For it could be used as a type of therapy. And it's just health reasons. Vitamin D, you need that sunlight. You need the fresh air. It it has its own health benefits. But the other thing is that, you know, in our community, we tend to either um, lock ourselves away from other things that other people have no problems just jumping into and trying.
Mm-hmm.
There's that piece of it, and I think sometimes in our community, when you want to do something that's not the norm for our community or society says is not the norm for our community, we tend to shy away from it. And I know for me, when I started photography, Nature Under Your Nose, having discovered something I was passionate about just changed my life at that point. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times, it's not often that people find out what they're passionate about in life until either it's too late or it's at
True.
an age where you can't really dig into it the way you want to. So with, using nature under your nose in the outdoors and increasing that representation, I'm using it as a tool to say, hey, look, somebody said this wasn't for you, and it may not be, but why not try to make sure that that's the case for you? You may have a passion that you've been secretly hiding and want to explore, but you're worried about what your community may think. You may be worried about what society may think, but that may be something that you need to do because society needs it or your community needs it. But if you're shying away from it because, well, we don't do that, or we don't be out here, we don't do this or that, the world is missing out on something you have, and you're missing out on something that you should or need to be doing for yourself and for others. So um, I think it's important because young people need to see that there's no limit to what they can do or what they want to involve themselves in. And the nature space and representation in nature is just another, in my mind, a piece of a grander puzzle where it's like this is something that people have been kept from. Check it out, see if it's for you, and involve yourself in it. May not be for you, but develop that mindset. At least I'm going to show up and see if this is for me. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not, that's fine. But at least you've developed that thing where I'm going to explore this, I'm going to chase something, and I'm not going to limit myself. And I remember, lastly, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of people that looked like me coming to my school to talk to me about something that they were doing, or and especially if it had to do with anything animals or nature, it was a white person coming in. It wasn't anybody black that looked like me coming in to talk about this. So I want to be that person and whatever spirit influence that I have to be that person to go to a school and say, hey, a guy came to my school today, Dad. He's a black guy. He takes pictures of animals.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets me know that if he can step out into this field where it's not a lot of people that look like him, I can step out into something that I want to do where I may not be heavily represented. But then that starts to a trickle down effect where more and more people are doing things where they not may not be represented, and then it's changing that paradigm for people just to have more representation in things that they want to do. So I just think that everybody else seems to have some kind of representation of all these different spaces and activities and careers or whatever. And I think we just need to do the same thing. And that's why I think the representation is important.
What has been your most unforgettable wildlife encounter?
Man, that's a tough one because it's been a lot. Can I give you at least two?
Sure.
Because okay, so the the first one I will mention is I was at my parents' house in Maryland, and I was in the woods not too far from the house, and somebody had texted me, and I was standing still looking at my phone like this. I look up, a red-tailed hawk is coming right at me, flies right past my. I could feel the wind off the wings, flies right past my head, and zips by, and I'm like, no one's ever going to believe this just happened. But I
Wow.
lied to you not. It flew like eye level, just right past me. And I don't know because I was standing so still, it just didn't like notice it was a human standing there or whatever.
Yes.
But that was one. And the second one would be, gosh, I was again, I was at my parents' house, and I wanted to film an owl. And when you are into this nature photography thing, you got to research the subjects and know, when they get up, what they eat, how they move, and these types of things. So I knew owls, either late in the evening or early, in the morning before dawn or whatever. So I got up and I grabbed my equipment and I started going through the woods. And I was kind of stuck in some brambles trying to work my way out of them. And I looked across there was like a dirt road. I looked across the dirt road and on the ground, I saw this kind of like plump kind of silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what the heck is that? So I look at it, and owls can turn their heads 180 degrees, right? So I'm
Yes.
looking at this thing. The owl turns its head around. All I saw was these big, just dark eyes staring at me, and it was almost like something out of Scooby Doo Mysteries because there was like a mist kind of going around. I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit! I was like, oh man, and I, I knew that if I moved, it was going to take off. But I tried to slowly get my camera and tripod down to film it, and it took off. And but the other thing about the owl was that most birds when they flap their wings, they make noise.
Mm-hmm.
Owls are silent. They can flap. You won't hear a sound, and that's how they hunt because they'll ambush like a rodent or something. And the rodent could be putting around eating, and the owl will fly from behind, silent. You won't even hear it until it got you. And just actually seeing an owl fly and not hearing anything,
Yes.
that was something else. That was amazing. So those are two experiences that I had. And I have plenty more that I could throw out there, but those are probably the top two that I remember the most um, doing this nature photography thing.
What is your intention in this space, David? What is your goal in this space of nature and wildlife?
My goal really is to use the platform of Nature Under Your Nose and social media and my work to just encourage people of color to get outside. I'm not asking you to pick up a $1,000 camera. You can use a cell phone, whatever the case may be. But I want people to get outside, especially Black folk in my community. Get outside, enjoy nature, explore, avail yourself of to the benefits of being out there. Um, it could be just taking a walk in the park. It could be kayaking. It could be sitting on the dock and putting your feet in the water. I just want you to get out there and experience nature and enjoy it and enjoy the benefits that everyone else has been getting for hundreds of years that we seem to have been missing. Also, I want people to look at what I've done and found a passion in a space where, um, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we're not heavily represented, but made a space for myself in that space to do something that I was passionate about, despite the fact that I may not be heavily represented, despite the fact that I can go to certain communities and they look at me crazy, like, why are you out in the woods taking pictures of animals? Why are you doing that? I want to use it as an encouragement tool for young people coming up to do what you want to do. Chase what you want to chase what you're passionate about, and don't let anybody discourage you from doing that because like I said before, there's so many things and there's so many things that we need in this world as a community. And I think those things that are needed are in people who chase their passions and they figure it out and they bring something new to the table. They bring something, a change or technology or just a different way of doing something. And I think that's housed in young people. And I wish I had found this passion of, photography and when I was in high school or a kid. And when I was a kid, like I couldn't afford the cameras and stuff that I have now. So
Mhm.
it would have been harder to do it. But with the opportunities that young people have now in technology, they can do so much more than what I could do. But I want them to dig in and not be afraid to chase the things that they're interested in, despite what anybody may say about it or how weird it may seem to anybody. So that's really the goal: is get people and get my people back outside enjoying nature and to get people to follow their dreams and their passions with no fear and just go for it and see what happens and don't let anybody tell them otherwise that they can't or shouldn't be doing it.
Today's conversation reminds us that nature is not a distant wilderness. It's right under our noses. Through science, storytelling, and service, David shows us what's possible when passion meets purpose. If this episode moved you, step outside, look closer, and remember, you belong there too. David, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity. I had a good time. This was fun.
Good. I'm glad you did. I had a good time too. Like I said at the beginning of our conversation, this is my first time, having a nature lover, having a nature photographer, having a biologist. Like, you checked all the boxes, David. You checked all the boxes. So thank you so much for sharing your stories, your wildlife encounters. I just appreciate it so much.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product and getting it out there for other people can check you out and check out what we're doing here. So that I'm very excited about the podcast. So thank you again for the opportunity.
You are more than welcome, sir. And to my community, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. You can get David's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.